Good morning, good afternoon, and most importantly, buonasera to all of you, especially those that are in Franciacorta country. This is Lars Leicht from the SOMM Journal. On behalf of our publisher, Meredith May, publisher and editor-in-chief, I'd like to welcome you all to our very special Edizione of our webinar series, talking about uncorking a new Edizione for Ca del Bosco Cuvée Prestige. And with me today, we have Maurizio Zanella of Ca del Bosco, the proprietor, founder and proprietor. Buonasera, Maurizio.
Buonasera, Lars. Come stai?
Just to fill everybody in on some housekeeping rules or housekeeping information, this is being recorded right now on Facebook Live. This recording will also be available on sommjournal.com website. And there will be a hard copy recap in the October-November issue of the SOMM Journal. So stay tuned for that. And right now, standing by live, we also have Jacob Gragg, who is manning the chat section, as well as the Q&A. So if you have any good topics to bring up or just want to shout out a greeting, by all means, please join us in the chat section. So welcome, everybody. So the big news here is about the development of the Cuvée Prestige becoming Edizione. Maurizio, can you tell us a little bit, what does that mean to us? What is the new spin on something that's a great story?
Well, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. First of all, thank you to Lars and thanks to the SOMM Journal to invite me. And I am proud to be here and to tell you the concept about Edizione. Everything born from the fact that how Lars knows, Ca del Bosco is producing a multi-vintage from many years and have done his experience producing a wine that by the law in Europe, the only wine where you can blend different vintages is only in certain appellation. Not all the appellation can blend different vintages in the wine. In most of the appellation is forbidden to blend vintages. But in certain appellation is proper and is legal to use different vintages to make a wine. So most of the producer in Italy, in France, in Spain, in Germany, they produce wine, normally bottle fermented wine, that they are built and they are called non-vintage. And in my opinion, this was, for Ca del Bosco philosophy, a wrong term, because the richness of Cuvée Prestige in Ca del Bosco is done because it's a multi-vintage. That means that we use different reserve wine. So the best wine of each single harvest is not used to the current wine, but we keep, like the hunts, we keep the best and we don't want to use, and we keep some in stainless steel, some in used bottle, in used barrel, sorry, and we keep this wine because this wine, they are like a color. When a painter make his painting, you need to have many color, and only if you have many color, it can give to the paint the real soul of the paint. So we need different color. The different color are the best wine of the different vintages. That's why in Ca del Bosco we have always called our wine multi-vintage and never called non-vintage. But there is another fact that the people that like to collect wine, the people that like to feel the difference, the people that love wine, they want to find always a difference between one exit and next exit. The year before is better. So to treat this wine with something that you can identify, give an identity to this wine. And so we thought, obviously, someone have thought before us, and I am speaking about Jackson and Krug, they have thought to this before us, so we have nothing invented, but we have think that we have to put our experience, and today we will taste the 33 year of our edition, to put a number that can give to the sommelier or to the consumer the right to put away certain wine and make a comparison with the 42, with the 44, and feel that the multi-vintage is done basically in Ca del Bosco to keep the same style and don't go very up and down depending on the harvest, but keep a style, a profile, and not to be changed like we do with the vintage Franciacorta, because in the vintage Franciacorta, we don't want to keep a style. We leave to our major shareholder, the gentleman upstairs, the freedom to decide how the wine it is. But with the multi-vintage, with the Cuvée Prestige, we want to give our style because we can play with the old vintages. But we don't want to do something that is equal because there are small difference in one edition to the other. That's why we decide last year to start to give the number of the number. If the number is exactly our history. So the 1 was the first year, and the 43 was the year that is on the market today, and that we present today, because in the, let's say, in the market, we want that Cuvée Prestige will be identified for its edition. And that's why Edizione 43 is the wine that we present today. And we want to tell you and try to tell you why this happened. And for sure, other big houses in the north of France, the east of Paris, they are just present the edition. Another big house have just presented last week his edition, and they have stopped his non-vintage, was very successful on the market, and they disinterrupt the production and they change with the edition. So I believe that our choice was, I hope, the good choice to give to the sommelier, to the connoisseur, to the wine lover, the opportunity to give an identity of a wine that have no vintage on the label.
Brilliant. I have to say, as a wine lover, I always prefer to speak in positive terms. And I love the turn of the phrase, rather than saying non-vintage. Okay, there's not a vintage on the label, but it comes from somewhere. So saying multi-vintage is absolutely brilliant. It's much more clear of what is in the wine. And then the idea of Edizione helps us understand, I guess, not so much because you want to have this standard of a house style, but it also helps us perhaps understand a little bit how you evolve as winemakers. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, for sure. We have to give the opportunity to the SOMM, to the consumer, to give an identity to the wine always, even if there is not a year. Then for sure, if you go in the technical sheet from the 43 edition, you will know, and we will speak about this later perhaps, of what and how, which vintage they are inside, and why there are these vintage inside, why there are this reserve wine, and go through, and we will have a QR code on the back of the label that will tell you from the next year everything about the wine.
Fantastic. So let me then ask you a question. You know, as you've ushered these wines through, you and I have many times had the discussion that 43 vintages for a wine house really isn't many when you think about the historical perspective, but obviously there is growth and development. So how would you compare 43 to 34 or to 24, just in the sense of evolution? What is new? What is developed more? What's the evolution been like?
I believe that I'm sorry, I was reading a question by Michael Epstein.
Michael.
And Michael mentioned a name that I have not done, but he understands that I was mentioned this name.
Of course.
And we have discontinued our multi-vintage, is not discontinued, but
renamed.
We rename our multi-vintage. So we don't change the philosophy, but we have not two wine. Is the same wine with the same philosophy, but with 43 years of experience. And I try to answer to your question, Lars, where 43 years is not too much in the noble wine, is an average. In my opinion, we have another 60 years in order to arrive to a decent number that is 100 years. Why 100 years? Because I believe that a noble wine need 3 times plantation in viticulture in order to get what you need from your vineyard. Because when we start to plant the first time, you do a lot of mistake because the clone, they was not what you want. The porta innesto, the root was not what you want.
Right.
The rootstock and the exposure was not what you want. So let's say that when you plant the second time, after more or less 30, 35 years, you believe that you plant in the best way because you know the clone, you know the rootstock, you know the exhibition, you know if you have to plant to 10,000 foot per hectare or 5,000. So you believe you are a professor, a teacher, you know everything. It's not like this. You plant the second time and you avoid, let's say, 90% of the problems, but you still have problem because the climate is changing, because the atmosphere is changing. So you need to change the third time when is around 70 years. And when you will change the third time, probably you get the right vineyard, and probably after 20 years, you will have the great grapes from your vineyard. So that's why I say until a winery doesn't have 80, 90 years, we are talking of excellence. We are talking of the best that a terroir can show. You need at least 100 years. So we are halfway with 43 edition. And I have time, even if I am not very young, but I have the time in order to see Ca' Bosco progress for other 40 years, not in winemaking, where we are already in a good point, in a good position, we are quite happy. But in viticulture, we have to learn a lot. Every day we learn a lot in viticulture, and we need to have 100 years in order to do what we believe is the best in our vineyard.
Well, as the Italian Americans always are fond of saying, cent'anni, here's through 100 years.
Yes, yes.
And it's funny, you brought up my friend and colleague, Michael Epstein, who is also a doctor. And he has pointed out to me many times that as a doctor, he considers himself a scientist. And he said, science is very different than wine. Science, when you are doing research and you need results, you just get more lab rats, right? Wine is something very different. It takes a tremendous amount of time. You have 12 months between vintages even, which is a huge amount of time. And then, as you say, when you plant a vine, you've got 5 to 8 years before you start getting decent results. And then we know how old vines can change. So that is, it's really a fascinating prospect. And I think it's what keeps us all so interested in the wine world. But tell us about some of the variables and the constants. So tell us a little bit, if you would, about what is one to expect. What is the general terms for the terroir of Franciacorta, and what are the very specific tweaks on that that come with the terroir of Ca' Bosco?
Okay, in this process of changing in vineyard that I was mentioned of the 100 years, Only the location are different because we are young. In Franciacorta, we are planting and we are doing wine from 300 years, but not in a professional way. Was in a very historical, simple, and for the noble family that they have vineyard inside their castle, inside their palazzo, inside the clos. Here is called, the clos is called here brollo. Brollo is a stone wall around the palazzo where inside you have the vineyard. And in France is clos, here is brollo. We are surrounding and exploring the Franciacorta in order to go in the altitude. And this is a big changing that we have done in the last 20 years from an average of 250, maximum 300 meters on the sea level altitude. Now we have been at 600 meter altitude because we believe that when you do a vineyard, you have to think really in 100 years. And in 100 years, obviously, the character and the global warming will be effective. So that's why we are going up, 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 where we try to get the difference between the temperature between day and night to make a Franciacorta is the most important thing. That means to get the ripeness of the grapes, keeping the freshness, the pH that you deserve for a wine that have to ferment twice. The first from sugar to alcohol, the second to make the magic bubble inside this wine. So these two fermentation, they pretend to get the ripeness of the grapes. Sometimes I heard some people, winemaker, that say to do our sparkling, we harvest earlier. And this is, they will never do a great wine because a great wine, a noble wine have to come from grapes that are completely finished their maturity cycle and their ripeness. Without the ripeness, it's impossible to make a great wine. But in the opposite, you need the freshness, the pH, the acidity, the minerality in order to have the support to make a wine that can ferment twice and have no problem to keeping this kind of salty that you need in your mouth to make the wine, I say, drinkable with pleasure and not half drop, but to drink how much the people want to drink, to be pleasant and not to be flat, to be without nervo, without, I say, a kind of verticality that give the life to those wines. So this is all a research of the soil, of the position, of the altitude. And I told before, you need a lot of time in order to get where we want to be. That's why I respect a lot who have 200 years more than us.
Now, so, you know, Franciacorta has evolved over time and will continue to evolve. You haven't evolved as a winemaker. When you founded the winery, things were very different in Franciacorta. Things were very different in the wine world. Can you tell us a little bit about that story? You just mentioned the idea of clos coming from castles. You're not Castello del Bosco, you are Ca del Bosco. So please tell us a little bit about the background there and your own evolution as a
is a nice story because it's very much a story that is more than Italian, perhaps is more similar to some Napa history. Is more American than European or Italian history, where normally a winery need 200 years, 300 years to get a reputation in the old world. And in the opposite, we see winery of 50 years in Napa that have become the most probably known in the world, even if they have done this process in 50 years. So Ca del Bosco is more like a Napa or a Sonoma winery than an Italian winery. And this happened. Why happened? It happened because when we start, we choose by chance the right timing. So we was in the right point, in the right time, where Italy winemaking make is new, let's say, Italian wine renaissance, where the bad wine was finished, and when they start the process of Rinascimento, Renaissance, to go back to what we was producing about 150 years before. How you know, Italian second name is Enotria, and Enotria is the land of wine. Unfortunately, we have 100-year dark, economical dark, from around 1870 to 1970. These 100 years make the economy in our country very poor. A lot of people was traveling to United States, to South America, to Belgium, to make the most, how you know, simple work, because in Italy there was no work. There was not the opportunity to live. Yeah. And pane e vino, bread and wine, were the only two things that was on the table every day, from Bolzano to Messina. And these are the only two components that was on the table. So wine, unfortunately, in those 100 years became not something to enjoy with, but was something to survive with. In 1961, in Italy, the consumption per chapter of wine was of 119 liters per person a year. If you take out the young people below 18 years old and the people that doesn't drink, we are close to 1 liter every day for every single person, every single day. That is amazing, and give you an idea that wine was food, it was something to be alive with, and was not. And obviously the industry take advantage of this and have put the farmers in a very bad position in order to pay the grapes always less money, and give to them, oblige them to produce a lot, changing all the plantation system, go in with machine and not by hand, and destroy the culture and the tradition in our country. So in 100 years, Italy have lost most of his culture and most of his tradition and most of his history in the winemaking, unfortunately. And most of the great appellation, they was in danger to survive, because the only one that was successful was Lambrusco, Chianti, Valpolicella, Soave. It was 5, 6 appellations that was producing very Lambrusco in very large scale and pasteurized and sent in all the world. This was the wine when I start in the 70s. So I start by chance. I start because I was a bad boy at school, and it was the 68, 70, where in Europe there was the communist revolution in the university. I was not in university because I was in the secondary school, because I was 13, 14 years old. I was very young, but I don't want to go to school. So for me, it was more exciting, play the war against the policemen. And so I was not a very good student. And then my family sent me in exile in this small house that they just bought in the middle of nowhere, where there was only the forest, and the house inside the forest was called, on the city map, was called this small house Ca del Bosco, that is the short of house in the forest. And that's why the name Ca del Bosco became how was named the house that my parents bought in order to make a farm where they want to have natural food. So the fresh eggs, fresh milk, the pork, the salami, the butter, and some wine. So I was sent in exile in the small village in the middle of nowhere. And probably wine is something that have given me the opportunity to make my life different, because I was in love with wine. And then everything started with the gentleman. There was the farmer that my parents, let's say, give the not only to make salami, but to try to educate this young boy that was not very good at school. So Mr. Gandossi, Antonio Gandossi, was a farmer, and he's become very soon my partner in crime in order to buy some land, plant some wine, and start what is now Bosco in a very passionate way, not with big planning. And this was really a good dream, because what we dream with Gandossi step by step is coming to reality. We have still something to do. We are not finished, but now Bosco have done a good job, and so we think that we can do something interesting. So I have a question from Michael. I love Michael because he remember everything, because he asked me that in 13, I don't remember even that I was here in 13. He remembered that in 13, thank you, Michael. I told that we want to reduce the size of the DOCG. The DOCG Franciacorta land, the border of the land, have been reduced, I believe, before the 13 of about 10%. So we take out from the border of Franciacorta all the flat part that is going to Brescia, and so we take away the border. We reduce the border. I believe was before 13. I don't believe after 13, Michael, we have not reduced the size of the land of the. We have reduced after 13. That's right. The kilogram, the hectoliter, hectoliter that we can produce for hectare, that they are going down to 60 hectoliter for hectare instead of 65. This will reduce. That is how much juice you can do from 1 hectare, how much wine. So now we can, in Franciacorta, you can do only 6,000 liters from 1 hectare. But in size, the reduction, the only reduction on the DOCG border was done, I believe, before the 13. I hope I answer you in the good way, Michael.
Well, I'll extend to that question and say, are you satisfied with those changes, or do you feel that there should be additional changes in the DOCG?
Well, probably how you know, Lars, Franciacorta is the only DOCG that have changed 6 times the rules from 90 to today. So in 30 years, we changed 6 times, taking the level higher every time. So asking always something more to the producer, because in one area that have not the culture, the tradition that we were speaking before, the only way to try to make all the producer, all the grower go in the same direction is to be strong on the rules. And to be strong on the rules doesn't make, the fact that Franciacorta is the most strongest rules of production of a sparkling wine in the world doesn't mean that it's the best sparkling wine in the world. Absolutely not. But those rules, very strong, help the producer to have a mentality to go in the same direction, to get an education, a culture that they take more time if you don't have those rules so strong. I don't know if but you cannot buy the culture, you cannot buy the tradition, but let's say the strong rules help you to make faster the growth of culture and tradition to the producer if they are obliged to go in a direction that is very small. If you have a larger option, you take more time to get where you want. If you make your direction, your objective more strained, you take less time to get where you want. So the answer is yes, I am satisfied, but we can do more, and we are doing more. So now Franciacorta, I believe, is one of the only area in Europe that have 73% of organic vineyard. So when we are 90, will be mandatory and will be the first, probably, I hope, appellation to be organic mandatory. So it's not anymore a choice, it's a rules. So you say you don't give freedom to anyone. I say it's not me that oblige, it's the producer that they are following a kind of direction. And the fact that I hope, I don't know if it will be happen because you need to be 90% to get this mandatory. But if it will be 91%, it will be mandatory. Again, Franciacorta will be the first, is the first in quantity, is the first in grapes for hectare, is the first, I speak in rules that are very strict. So we have a lot to do. We have not finished our job.
And you started producing red wines, or I'm sorry, still wines in 1972 and sparkling wines in 1976. Again, the world was a very different place back then.
Lars, you know the number better than me, but the answer is yes. We start first with the still and then with the bubble.
And what was your feeling at the time? Did you feel like you were cutting edge and started something new, or did you see that you had a long way to go back then?
Well, at the time, our still wine was revolutionary, exactly why there was the bubble, because Bosco produced the first Chardonnay produced in Italy in 82. No one other producer have never made a Chardonnay. So now we are all boring about Chardonnay because it's in all the world. But at that time in Italy, there was no one producing Chardonnay. And this was unique. It was unique. Why? Because it was a mistake. Was a mistake because the grapes in Franciacorta should have been Pinot Bianco, Pinot Grigio, and Pinot Nero, but by mistake, they put some Chardonnay and they tell us that it was a different clone of Pinot Bianco. And this to tell you how approximately was the culture in Italy, even in the producer, that there was not make a difference between Pinot Blanc and Chardonnay, but was the same variety. It was all Pinot Bianco with different clones. That is, if you think this today is totally crazy, but at the time, and we have the same mistake with Carmenère, with Cabernet Franc. So, and this tell you and confirm you how was not focused on quality Italy in those years, unfortunately.
Right. It's come a long way. And what is basically the mix now between Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and there is some Pinot Bianco as well planted? What is the dominant in Franciacorta and in particular in your vineyards?
Well, in Franciacorta, the dominant is, with no doubt, is the Chardonnay, and Pinot Noir is the second, and Pinot Blanc is the third one. But from harvest 17, we are very proud to announce that there is a fourth varietal that is the local varietal, the unique varietal called Erba Mate. ERBAMAT, Erba Mate. That is something that you can find on the ampelographic books from 1700, and is only in the region of Brescia, exactly the small plant that was on the Garda Lake on the side from Brescia, on Franciacorta, and on the valley that go to the mountain here, Adamello Mountain, called Val Camonica. So Erba Mate was a white varietal that became optional until 10% in the blend of Franciacorta starting from harvest 2017. But I always say is a project, it will be effective in 2027. So we need 10 years in order to research the wood and to plant a decent quantity in order to get not 10%, but 7-8% of Erba Mate in our blend. In Bosco, we are more not all so used on Chardonnay. In Ca del Bosco, we have double of the Pinot Noir of the average of Franciacorta, and we have triple of the average of Pinot Bianco of Franciacorta. Okay. So we are not, Franciacorta normally is around 85, 90% of Chardonnay, and only 10% between Pinot Noir, a very 1-2% on Pinot Bianco. And in for Ca del Bosco is a lot different. We are around 25% of Pinot Noir and 11% of Pinot Bianco. So we are close to 36, and then now we are adding Herba Mate. So we will be around 40% of the other varietal and only 60% of Chardonnay. But depending on which wine we produce, those percentages are changing. That means that the wine that we want a long maturation potential, like Anna Maria Clementi, the Pinot Noir go higher because it gives us the opportunity to have wine that can mature and develop with 10, 12, 20 years on the lease. And we need Pinot Noir to make a good maturation. Right. So it's very different how we approach the varietal. But Herba Mate for us is very important because Herba Mate is giving to us, first of all, 1 week of difference between the harvest time. So Herba Mate is always the less ready to pick up because they have a very high acidity. And we believe that this high acidity will help us also with the global warming in 20 years to balance what we are losing with the temperature that are changing. So let's say that Herba Mate is something that will be only in Franciacorta, DOCG rules, and so we'll make the root to our wine, the root to our land, and not to be with only with international varietal, but to have a local varietal will be very important to give personality to our wine, and also to make Franciacorta with the root in his territory, in his terroir.
So going back to our theme, that's even more important to understand. Future Edizione will be evolved as having more Herba Mate.
Yeah.
And in addition to the acidity, what else does Herba Mate bring to the party?
I have to be honest, from what we have done until now, the big thing is the acidity, the verticality, and the fact to make the Chardonnay not too predominant, too fatty, and give more elegance to the wine and more verticality. So more austerity.
Okay. Yep, austere, more austere wines.
Austere wines.
It brings austerity.
Yeah.
So it's likely to say that Herba Mate will never be a dominant component of Franciacorta.
For the moment, we allowed maximum 10% in the DOCG rules, and we will see how will work in evolution, because you know Franciacorta have a potential maturation time of 10, 15 years, and we will have to prove before to go higher how Herba Mate will have increasing the aging potential.
Right. Now, going back for a minute to the Pinot Noir, also under the Edizione label, you will have the Rosé.
Yeah.
And what is the percentage of the Pinot Noir in the Rosé?
It's depending on from vintage to vintage, but we do 100% Pinot Noir Rosé that is Anna Maria Clementi, that is 100% do with the Lestage, so just with the rosé wine that we keep the color from the skin. With the Prestige is different. The rosé is a blend of Chardonnay Pinot Blanc, obviously white, with some Pinot Noir that you have color inside. And when we blend, we do the cuvée, then we do the second fermentation in the bottle, rosé. And so the percentage of Pinot Noir is changing year by year. But let's say that the minimum is 20% and the maximum is 35. So we are between these two numbers, but depend on the year, because we have in the multi-vintage, in the Edizione, also the reserve wine that play a very important roles in order to balance the wine, to give, how I told you in the beginning, the Bosco taste, the Cuvée Prestige taste that we don't want to change. We want to keep this continuity in style, because it's so successful with our consumer that we cannot change. And now, very important thing, all those wine are extra brut. We will never put brut anymore, because different with other appellation, we don't need sugar to correct our wine. The wine are already right. That's why not only by law, sparkling wine is forbidden. How you know, Franciacorta is not a sparkling wine, but even in a philosophic way, I believe the Franciacorta is a wine that incidentally have some bubble inside. But it's more a wine.
It is delicious.
Because it tastes round, but you have 1.5 grams what you have in the glass.
Right.
So nothing, is just a touch, because the sugar doesn't need to balance something that is unpleasant. The wine are already round, because keeping the old vintages in barrel, in used barrel, allowed us to make a cuvée that is more a wine than a sparkling wine. So even if it's forbidden to put spumante on the label everywhere, how you know there are only 2 wines with bubble in the world that is forbidden to call sparkling wine, and one is in north of France and one is in Franciacorta. These 2 wines, all the fermenting wine in Europe, you have to put on the front label Vin Mousseux in France,
right,
sparkling wine in England, spumante in Italia, sect in German, cava in Spain is mandatory. There are only 2 exceptions where it's forbidden to put spumante in the front label, or Vin Mousseux, or even in the back label, or Vin Mousseux in another appellation. And that's why we want to be considered wine and not sparkling wine, because it's forbidden by the European law to call it spumante. This is not spumante, so it's not a sparkling wine. And from this is very subtle, I would say subtle difference.
Subtle. Yeah, very subtle.
But when you do a wine list, I always say to make the wine list and you put Franciacorta and the sparkling wine is a mistake, sorry. Is not a sparkling wine. Why? Because by law, this is a wine, is not a sparkling wine. So he deserves his appellation alone, like you do with another appellation of north of France.
Right.
So we have to be treated the same way if you want to do your wine list in the correct way. So sometimes I make some enemy because the people believe that I am criticized. I try to take some culture. I don't want to criticize, and to make understanding that Franciacorta is a wine and is not a sparkling wine.
So you're still a revolutionary, even though they took you off the street.
Well, I still am used to go on the street. I don't have anymore the bottle with the gasoline inside, but at the time, but I still I don't shut up if I don't need.
Of course not. Just a couple of other points. You also make a Dosage Zero, which is a vintage dated wine, correct?
Well, it's a very good question related to the fact that I told you that Cuvée Prestige is extra brut. We do now 3 wine Dosage Zero, 1 vintage, Anna Maria, and the brut of Pinot Noir, the vintage Pinot Noir.
Right.
So all the 3 wine are Dosage Zero. This is make you understand why is, let's say, most of my friend of most of consumer, they want to make comparison between Franciacorta and other region. And I always say it's stupid. It's like to say that Bulgaria is equal to Medoc because they are both on the seaside, because both have Cabernet, and because both they have barrique aging wine. Even if everything is equal, I will never compare Bulgaria with Medoc. In the same way, we cannot compare Franciacorta with Champagne because the reason is what you told me now. We make 3 wine Dosazero, 3 wine Extra Brut, only 1 wine Brut, and that will be not do Brut anymore. Also, this 4th wine will become Extra Brut because we never need more than 6 grams, never. Right. What the other region needs in order to make a balance. But I am not saying that the sugar makes the quality. I don't want to be misunderstood. A great wine is a great wine with sugar or without sugar, but it's different to compare a wine that have a big sugar addition to a wine that doesn't have. Each one have his own personality, his reason to exist, but we cannot compare those wines. So I am very, let's say, proud that we have done Dosazero from the beginning in the 70s. And before was only 1 wine, was the vintage collection. And now we had Anna Maria Clementi and we have Pinot Noir vintage collection, 100%. So we have now 3 wines, 0 dosage. Nice. And they explain the difference between Franciacorta and other regions.
And the Satin, you were a pioneer in the production of the Satin.
Yeah, Satin is a funny story because he had a name that was Cremant, and they forbid us to use it, Cremant, because Cremant was an exchange that Champagne have done with the other AOC from France, where they was forbidden to call méthode champenoise in Bourgogne, in Loire, in Alsace. So they lose Cremant because it was exchange with méthode champenoise. So Cremant was only for the AOC producing bottle fermented sparkling wine in France and was forbidden in Europe. So I was producing a Cremant wine, that means with less pressure and only white varietals, so Pinot Bianco and Chardonnay, and we was without name because it was forbidden to use in a certain point. And so we study together with another winery in Franciacorta how to name the wine. So we found the name Satin that we give like a gift to the consortio when they do the category of the wine with less pressure and less done with only white varietal. It became a category of Franciacorta, the Satin category, that is unique and very successful wine because it's more, let's say, flattering wine because it's more subtle, the bubble are more small, it's a Blanc de Blanc. So especially for, there is a certain public that they don't like to have too much gas when they eat. They love a wine that have the CO2, the bubble of smaller and not so strong in your stomach. Mm-hmm. And so it's very successful.
Well, it took me 47 minutes, but I finally got you to say the name of that other sparkling wine from north of France. So thank you.
You get it.
I finally cracked it. But I have to say, listen, I'm drinking the Edizione 43 right now. I feel very fortunate. It is a beautiful wine. It also, I see it happens to be sparkling.
By chance.
By chance. And I'm sitting here on a warm summer day in the suburbs of New York where I'm broadcasting from, and it is absolutely perfect, refreshing and crisp and clean. And I'm looking forward to having it with my late lunch in a little while. So Maurizio Zanella, congratulations on helping define for us the way that man interprets the multi-vintage series of Ca del Bosco Cuvée Prestige each year. And best wishes with that, and good luck with the harvest is coming up soon, is it not?
Yes, we are in the beginning in 1 month.
Wow.
And so we have to cross our finger and everything have to go in the best way. And I hope that you and all the SOMM gang will be soon in Italy, in Franciacorta, to see us, because it's better to come to see Cadel Bosco than to look at my face. And so it gives more emotion to see Cadel Bosco. And I wait you and all the people that was listening by appointment. I wait everyone here.
Great. I have my appointment for next month, so I'm very much looking forward to that.
I am
and we'll
happy.
See you soon. And thank you to Cadel Bosco, Santa Margherita, USA, of course, and thank you to the SOMM Journal on behalf of Meredith May, our publisher and editor-in-chief. Thank you for tuning in and for reading our recap and watching the recording if you're up to it. Salute, buona vendemmia. Grazie, Maurizio.
Grazie, see you soon.
Okay.
Grazie, Lars.
Arrivederci.
Grazie.